Hello and welcome to this week's episode of State of Real Estate. My name is Jon Carissimo and the show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We're here every single Friday to help you better understand the real estate industry, to help you mastermind. And today we're taking a very mindset type of approach. And in a little bit of more of a rare episode, a little bit more of a focus on my own history of how I've gotten to this point today, not just the successes, but the failures along the way that have taught me so much, not only the things that set me ahead, but also the things that set me back, that I've been able to learn from, and that really has culminated to the position that I'm in today, to not just be able to help myself better their future, but help others better their future as well. But it goes back to very humble beginnings. And this is, there's part of me, because I was taught never to brag. That was something instilled with me at a young age and reconfirmed later in life. Later in life, I learned the word humility and the concept of being humble. And that's when a lot of the stuff that I was taught earlier on in life made a little bit more sense to me. But at the same time, there's so many people that figure out how to become successful and have the capacity to share that information, but choose not to. Maybe because they don't know how to effectively do that. Maybe because they don't want to do that. Maybe because they're afraid somebody might steal their secrets, their ideas, and make it into their own. So when you're looking for stories of success, they could be kind of few and far between in the grand scheme of things for how much success really does exist out there. So I come to you today, as I feel it is my duty because I know this story, and again, from what I've been able to make of myself, there's so many different reasons for it. I want to try to break down today some of the key things that I learned along the way and some of the key things that'll help you expedite the process of getting a better future, and some of the major mistakes that I made that kept me held back for longer than I would have. So rewinding back to the beginning. Not the beginning, but growing up. I didn't grow up rich, but at the same time, not necessarily poor by the typical general average standards. Enough to have friends with bigger, better, nicer houses and that do nicer trips, that have nicer cars and so on and so forth. So enough to see all that is out there that, my family couldn't afford. And so growing up, I was able to have a roof over my head. I was able to not go hungry. Now, granted, I wasn't necessarily eating the best food, which still to this day, I'm trying to undo some of the health mistakes that I made earlier on in my life. But I was able to eat. So don't get me wrong. There's people that have been in far worse positions that have hit more of a rock bottom or came from a lower beginning than I might have. But it's all relative. Even people that do have a silver spoon in their mouth when they're born, as the saying goes, people born into extreme wealth, even then they have a duty to be able to protect that wealth. But maybe a plastic spoon, those little white plastic spoons, that's maybe the spoon I was born in my mouth with. So growing up, I grew up in a restaurant. And my parents weren't in real estate when I was growing up. Eventually, my dad did get his real estate license, and I did get to grow up seeing some of that as well in my later teen years. But really growing up, the first everything almost revolved around our restaurant. And this wasn't like some big franchise. This wasn't multiple locations. This was one restaurant in a decent location. I mean, it wasn't, there were probably worse places it could have been, but it definitely wasn't a great location. And a lot of things that I got to witness growing up in that restaurant, from seeing things that were done well, seeing things that weren't done well, seeing the successes, seeing the failures of that, and seeing the exit that my parents were able to make. And part of that exit involved my dad getting his real estate license. That was back in 2001 that he got his real estate license. Did his first transaction. His first closing on the morning of September 11th of 2001. And so, but going back before that, growing up, the earlier years of my life, one of the things it is that we could afford to do was to be able to go to the movies, especially when they had like the 4 or 5, whatever promo they had for the cost to go to the movies. And what we had to do if we wanted to be able to go to the movies is we'd have to go to the movie fund. And where did the movie fund come from? From the little video games that were in this restaurant that people would put quarters into. Now, this wasn't like an arcade. There wasn't like hundreds of dollars coming out of these machines. But it was able to give us money, so we had some extra spending money to be able to go see a movie. Yeah, we'd have to go at the matinee, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, I'm sure I can't get in trouble for this now, and it wasn't my choice. I was a minor, but I was told to be under the couch. How many of you guys at home where your parents did that when you were a kid, where they lied about your age so they could get the kids' meal, the kids' discount, whatever kid thing it might have been? So a lot of that going on, and I grew up learning how to be frugal. I learned how to save money, how to get by with what it is that you had. And that's not too different from a lot of Americans. Whatever level, I mean, until you start getting into really high levels of income where you truly do have surplus money and you're able to build wealth, that's a different category. But when and honestly, even when you are building wealth, you might still be at the point where you can't live a life of luxury, where maybe going to the matinee movie is the thing. Like, oh, wow, maybe we could go to the movies, see that new movie that came out. Yeah, we'll have to go to the matinee. Yeah, we'll have to go make sure we got enough quarters, but we go and count the corners at little quarter rollers. So that way we could do this. We go even buy some popcorn sometimes, most of the time. We always made sure we had some money for popcorn. From the quarters, though. That's literally, we would come up, and the first couple times, I'll be honest with you, it was embarrassing walking up and paying in quarters. But it was just me, my brother, and my dad usually going to these movies. And so, it was just us. We brought the quarters. They broke them out, counted them up, gave us our tickets, and we got to see a movie. And so today, when I want to go to see a movie, I usually swipe my American Express. A lot of times I'm going to the Cinebistro, where if you've never been to the Cinebistro, it's an overpriced restaurant where you could watch a movie. I'll be honest, I do think the food at Cinebistro used to be better. But at the same time, you want a cheeseburger while you're watching a movie, you can do that. That's available. That would take a lot more quarters than what we were doing back in the day to go get the discounted movies. So how have I been able to get to this point? How have I been able to go from that beginning to where I am today, much more financially confident, nowhere near, don't get me wrong, I'm not here telling you like this is a memoir. I think that's also part of the reason why, I've talked about this, I've touched on this topic of where I've came from and whatnot and other subjects, but we've never really done a whole episode telling really this story. But from counting those quarters to what it really taught me was the value of $1. And here's the thing, when my parents sold their restaurant, when they exited, it took them like 2-3 years maybe to get the thing sold. They got a little bit of money out of it, but for as much money as they've poured into it, for as much as they had invested into it, it didn't really necessarily create wealth. My daddy saw new opportunity through real estate. And he was sick of having to fill in for people that would call out, having to make deliveries, having to fry chicken wings. There's a big chicken wing place. Sold chicken wings and Italian food. What a combination. But it was pretty busy. There was, again, successes. There was many things that were done right. But running a business, especially the food business, is extremely difficult. That's one thing one thing I took away from that is I never want to work in a restaurant, in the restaurant industry again. Because it's a tough, rough business. Make some decent money if it's done right, but there's a lot that has to be done right, and it takes a lot of money even just to get started and to play in that game, and it's really an oversaturated market where you have very small. So look, we're not here to talk about how the restaurants are not necessarily the best way forward. We're here to talk about that best way forward it was that I found. That before that, my dad found. But here's the thing. So I got to grow up a little bit as well around real estate. We were there helping my dad with open houses, helping him, bake cookies for his open houses, helping him set up yard signs, riding around with him while he's doing showings and sitting in the car. Different times back then. I don't know if, but you know what? I'm sure you can keep the car running, the AC running. I'm sure it'll be fine. Car locked, AC running, whatever's fine. And then they got the Teslas with like the dog mode, so that's not out of the question to leave your kid in the car while maybe you're showing a house. Is that the ideal? Probably not. But could it be done? Absolutely. Because if you could find that way forward, if you could find a way to make things work despite the things that are working against you actively, that's where you could start to make progress. That's where you could start to build something. And so my dad found some success with real estate, so much that he wanted to get his instructor license, not just to make a little bit of extra money, but to help other people get into this. And I got to see this growing up. And ultimately, I didn't want to get into real estate because I went to public school. Never went to a private school. I went to public schools, public school for elementary, middle, high school. I'm a product of the public school education system. I went to community college, was able to use that community college credit, roll that into USF, where I eventually went there. Public education. Didn't really have a lot of connections. Even a lot of my extended family doesn't even live here in Florida because my parents wanted to go out on their own and start a brand new and really conquer the new land of Florida, coming from New York. A lot of family up there around upstate New York, but we're really isolated down here. Building a lot of, again, everything from scratch. And so I was going again to public school, was told, got to go to school, got to get a good job. Got to graduate college so you can get a good job. Because if you don't graduate college, you won't be able to get a good job. You're not going to make a lot of money. You'll be frying French fries at McDonald's, was what I was told. I actually worked at McDonald's for 2 weeks while I was in high school. One of my first jobs, it was actually selling electronics. But I was working for Circuit City, and they went out of business. And at one point, I wanted a job. I wanted to make money. And so I went and got a job at McDonald's because I saw that they were hiring. And apparently it's really easy to get a job at McDonald's. And I found out it's really easy because they're constantly hiring because no one wants to continue working in McDonald's. Yes, there were some lifers that are in there that had the plans of owning their own McDonald's franchise someday. Maybe they were just, I remember speaking to somebody who was a janitor that said he was going to own his own McDonald's someday. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to own one of these because I've been in the restaurant business, and 2 weeks before I found another job working in a warehouse. And so I did that while I was in high school, working in a warehouse, but I also started building a little bit of a mobile DJing business. And I actually was a mobile DJ, a successful mobile DJ for several years. DJ'd many weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, birthdays, anniversaries, corporate events. And I was really enjoying that. But I also remember this around the time also with the 4-hour work week when that first was kind of coming out. And I was like, well, you know what? I don't want to be and it was actually a question my dad asked me. Because I was doing this while I was going to school and I was going to college. I was actually going to school for business, specifically marketing. And I was learning more about like running a business. And I was like, you know what, let me take this DJ business and let me spin it off into an actual business where I'm not the one going there, lugging all my equipment in, putting it in and out of the car. Yeah, I could have hired an assistant, but at the end of the day, I was just selling my time at a pretty handsome rate. I mean, I would usually get paid $150, $200 an hour as a high school kid to DJ somebody's wedding. Now, factor in all the travel time and unloading the equipment and everything like that. It's not that lucrative, but it was great money for me in high school, especially when I already had a job working after school. That's what I did. I like to work. I like to make money because, again, I grew up without. I grew up seeing what money could get. And so I was like, I want to go out there and get some of this on my own. You know, my parents, they were busy just trying to take care of the family, keep a roof over our head, keep us fed. I had to buy my own first car. I had to buy so many of the things on my own. I was a lot of this figuring out how to become something of myself. When I went to school, to pay for that on my own. Yes, I was able to get some subsidization from like Bright Futures and whatnot, but I still have student loans to this day. Not just because I don't want to pay them off, because I want to remind myself of what college did to me, but also because the interest rate's not too bad. But still to this day. And so many of the things that I've learned came from outside of school. And the things it is that I've learned outside of school cost me so much more than those student loans. Because usually when I'm learning out of a classroom, anybody, not just me, you're learning through experience. And that's the most painful teacher. It's the most expensive teacher. So back to my career path, I wanted to spin this DJ business off into a business, turn it into a thing, something where I can, book other DJs and so on and so forth. But I didn't have the business acumen. I didn't have the business knowledge, and I didn't have really a strong network. I didn't have a strong network of other DJs to be able to build this anything. And so what actually eventually happened is it more so just fizzled out rather than turn into anything. It wasn't anything that I sold off. And ultimately, that would be probably one of the first major failures I would say of my life. And I wasn't trying to be, actually at one point I was trying to be a world famous DJ. But even just running it as a business, not even trying to be world famous, just, business to be able to make average income without having to, again, constantly just be running around all over Florida DJing weddings. And I couldn't figure that out. And so I was discouraged. And what I did instead is I focused more on my school studies. I focused more on what I was learning. I was taking higher level classes now, more specifically about marketing, and it was more interesting, and I was really realizing a lot of the stuff it was that I didn't know. And so one of the things I also did while I was in schools, I got another job working for a Fortune 500 company with over 180,000 employees working in sales. And I thought I knew how to sell before, and I even thought I used to know how to sell back then, when I was ranked as one of the top employees in the entire company out of 185,000 employees for sales. Top 10 consistently. I think number 3 was the highest I got in the entire company for sales. I honestly don't think about it too much anymore, just because what I was doing for sales then was so wrong compared to what I know now and how I treat business now and what I was able to learn eventually transition into real estate. So this corporate job that I had, I wasn't trying to just be a salesperson my whole life, because there was also this concept they had of caps where I could only earn so much money. So if I did want to earn more money, I would have to advance through the company. But what was happening, the economy wasn't great at this time. The economy was in contraction. And so the company was also in contraction. That company's still into contraction to this day because they're still adjusting to, they've been around since like the 1950s, 60s, something like that. So they're still adjusting to modern day business. And today they actually have half the amount of employees than when I used to work there. And ultimately, I thought this was going to be, at one point, I thought this was going to be my lifelong career. I thought I was going to advance with the company. But when I realized the positions that I wanted to advance to, I wasn't able to advance to, not even as quickly, but even at all. And part of it is my own fault looking back on it. I'm always, critical about what I've done in the past or any past thing and how that has ripple effects that affect the future and how I could change what I do now so I don't make those same ripples in the future. And so there's a lot, again, I could go back and criticize myself over, but at the same time, that position that I was in offered minimal, if any, control over my future. The control of my future was in the hands of somebody else in exchange for the security of a paycheck. And a paycheck that I couldn't grow at the rate that I wanted to grow it. That I couldn't build my life in the way that I wanted to. And so, again, I was on the path to go to school, to get a good job. I went to school, got a good job, spent 5 years there, and realized this isn't for me. This isn't going to work out. This isn't where I see myself in the future. This isn't what's going to take me to the heights it is that I want to go in my life. And so ultimately, that involved me quitting and going into real estate. And at this point, I wouldn't call any point that I had been at right now really too successful, financially or otherwise. Basically getting by up until this point. I think at this point, the car I was driving was a 20-year-old Crown Victoria. Like the old police cars, the ones the mafia people drive, that's because they got the giant trunk that you can throw a body into. That was me. I had a nicer SUV before that, but it had about 150,000 miles on it, and the engine blew up on me. So best I could get into right then was that Crown Victoria. Now, one of the things I did do before I quit my job is I leased a vehicle. I leased a vehicle for 3 years because I knew as a realtor, I thought, I didn't know, because I thought as a realtor showing up in a Crown Victoria, people wouldn't take me serious. So I went out there and leased the best car I could, an Acura, like their entry-level model. Literally had to have my mom co-sign because I still didn't even make enough money to be able to, maybe it was my credit score, but ultimately not able to qualify for this. Because I'd also bought everything privately before. I didn't have the credit to be able to lease a brand new car. And so, you know, I'm eternally grateful for my mom for that. But at the end of the day, even if I was still driving that beater of a car that was that 20-year-old Crown Victoria, I probably would have sold more real estate, honestly. Because that's one example of how I was focused on all the wrong things. I was focused on losing my W-2 paycheck and saying, okay, well, if I lose this income, I think that was part of it. I couldn't count my commissions as the income for it. It had to be off my base income. That wasn't much money because I made most of the money through bonuses and commissions. And so I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to have a paycheck because I'm going to be an independent contractor. And yeah, I could probably buy one of these cars cash eventually once I get super rich in real estate, but I need a better car because no one's going to take me seriously in this Crown Victoria. So I went out and did what I did to go now get a car payment to where, and you'd think maybe I had a ton of money saved up, and I had a little bit of money, but it was locked up in a 401k. And so what I did is I actually paid the tax penalty to cash out. It was a significant penalty. I want to say it was almost like a third, if not more, of the money. This was so long ago, so I'm really trying hard to remember the exact details for you here. But ultimately, I cashed out my 401k to be able to make this transition from quitting my job into getting into real estate. And again, I was doing so many of the wrong things. I was focused on not just the car. That's one example of bad decisions I was making. I was focused on designing my business card. I was focused on what I didn't have. When all the salespeople would call me and say, hey, you need a website, you need a contact manager, you need this, you need that, you need this. The one thing I did need, and this person didn't call on the phone, and if the other people that did call on the phone, I probably said, I don't need that. So that was my mistake going into this as an arrogant little kid. That's why I look back on myself when I was starting my real estate career. I was arrogant. I was a know-it-all. I thought, yo, well, you know, I had this successful DJ business before. No, I didn't. I mean, I did in terms of a self-employed type of venture, but it's really just me owning my job. It wasn't really so much a business, even though it had a business name, a logo, all that other, you know, business stuff, but it was just me. I was the one answering the phones. I was the one booking appointments. I was the one out there doing the song and dance and show. And I had done some other things along that time. I had done like some real estate wholesaling, tried at least doing real estate wholesaling. I never really found much success with that whole concept of wholesaling. For everyone that maybe has heard of that before on YouTube, you've seen some sort of ad about it. And especially with basically the way the industry is going, especially with the recent NAR settlements and whatnot, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to legally earn that wholesale fee. Whereas if you have a real estate license, easy peasy to get paid because you're entitled to compensation. That's why they're literally out there having court cases trying to clarify, essentially, the commission of what's being paid, because there is so much of it on the table. And that's really the big gist of that, is just making sure that this money is being disclosed so people know what it is that they're paying for. And hopefully the thought is that real estate agents will, as the narrative says, cut their commissions, but really what's going to happen is real estate agents are going to step up to the plate and provide even more value than they ever have before to be able to stay relevant. But back to my story, back to me figuring out the early stages of my real estate career. Again, I was focused on all the wrong things. I was focused on the things that I didn't have. Spending money on a car, a lease payment that I had to pay, and now I didn't have a paycheck. So again, I had that little bit of lump sum of a 401k. You know, my parents didn't have money to loan me out. You know, luckily my mom had good enough credit to be able to co-sign for me. But they didn't have money. It was that they could loan me. You know, my mom was a deli manager at Publix. That was her life after they sold the restaurant. So, you know, not anything super wealthy. They did a little bit with stocks back in the day, made a little bit of money, but nothing as a career out of it. Just a little bit here and there. But that's the problem. And one of the things that I've learned today, going back and looking at the way that my life started, the things that I had to reprogram myself on from living from that frugal scarcity mindset. Again, even in the beginning of my real estate career, focusing on all the things it is that I didn't have. When I was in that frugal scarcity mindset, literally business ran away from me. For anyone that's into like the laws of the universe, the secret, all that woo-woo type of stuff, I am too, so don't be offended by the term woo-woo. But ultimately, I was like, if you try to push the two north ends of a magnet together. Has anybody ever tried to do that? That was one of the things I learned in school, playing around in some science class because I was bored and not paying attention to what the teacher was saying, is that when you try to push the same sides of the magnet together, I was so fascinated by this, that you push those two sides together and they push themselves apart. And that's what actually happens when you're negative. You push out everything that could be positive. So only negative is going to be in your field. And that was where I was at. And it wasn't really until I was able to change my mindset that I was able to change my habits, change the way that I thought, change the way that I worked, and really change my future. So there's a few key lessons that I've learned along this path getting to today. You know, we want to continue along the story. I'll make it brief. You know, we might make this into a whole book or something someday if you really want to know the whole story and all the details, and we'll do the fact checking of exactly what happened and what the things were, because my memory is not the greatest. That's what happens when you're constantly trying to learn new things. It pushes out these memories that don't serve you. And the only thing that these memories serve me as is inspiration to keep myself propelled forward, to never let myself get to the levels it was that I was in the past. Could I have gone lower? Could I have started from a farther rock bottom? Absolutely, but I don't want to go anywhere near that. I honestly don't even wish that on my worst enemy. This is such an abundant world that we live in. There's so much for the taking. And oh, you might say, oh, taking, oh, I don't want to take from people. You're focused on the negative connotation of that word. You're not taking. You're providing value. And in exchange for that value, you're being compensated. That's one example of the mindset shift it is that you need to make, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one's going to believe in you. And I knew that. That's one of the first things you'll learn in sales. If you're in sales and you haven't learned that already, you're going to learn it someday. But it's usually one of the first things people learn is that if you're not confident, people won't buy into what it is that you're saying. Whatever it is, whether you're trying to persuade them, whether you're trying to convince them to buy something, whether you're just in some sort of argument. That's the mistake everybody makes when they're arguing, is they're only worried about elaborating what their point is rather than trying to find a point of agreement. But the confidence I had when I was starting my real estate career was false confidence. Why was it false confidence? For a lot of reasons. Number one, I didn't believe in myself. That was the biggest reason. And when I go back and I dissect why it was that I didn't believe in myself, because I got to a really scary point when I was starting my real estate career. I wasn't counting quarters anymore. I had a debit card. I had checking accounts. I had credit cards. That was a big part of me starting there and transitioning there. Still trying to break some of those habits of the use of credit cards, but prior to that, I wouldn't use credit cards like I did, but I was literally using those credit cards as a way to break away from the lifestyle it is that I had. And that's the same way that I use my debt today. Whenever it is that I'm using debt, it primarily, almost always, is for something that's generating value one way or the other, whether it's an investment in a business, an investment in a property, a mortgage loan, whatever that might be. And so, coming from that frugal stage of a lot of times, it took me 11 months to get my real estate license. From taking the course to actually passing the state exam, 11 months. And that's totally uncalled for. That's totally unnecessary. There's people that blow me away today. That we've got one person in our reviews, 17 days. That's the fastest we've seen. If you've done it faster, go put it in your review so we can say someone else has done it faster than 17 days. A lot of people doing it in less than 30 days. A lot of people, maybe they take a couple of months. But to stretch it out across 11 months, that's still not uncommon. If that's you, don't fret yourself. Look at where I've been able to put myself to today, even though it took me 11 months to get my real estate license. And it actually wasn't me having to retake the exam. I could promise you that I passed my exam on the first try, the state exam, both the class and the state exam. But was I initially prepared to pass the state exam on the first try? No. If you go watch any of our videos on the pass first try strategy, you'll probably hear me tell more of that story of how I was able to study, and essentially 10 months later, because it was about a month or so of hardcore, almost relearning of the material, but essentially studying, that got me to the point where I was ready and prepared to take that state exam, passed it on the first try, didn't quit my job right away, started with a broker that was recommended to me without interviewing any other brokers. Huge mistake there, because I was in a brokerage that wasn't a good fit for me, because I was focused on all the wrong things. But I was moving in the right direction. So let's go to the board, and I want to put some of the things it is that I've learned, that I've been able to understand through my journey, that have helped me. And these are things that I think are going to be very broad, very general, and very universally applicable, whether you're in real estate or otherwise. So anybody tuning in, I hope these are going to be valuable and help you, even a fraction of how much these ideas and concepts have been able to help me. Number one, the number one thing that I've been able to do to put myself in the position today where I'm not counting quarters to do anything. You know, there was actually a point in time, I don't really do this anymore, just because, you know, I value money, and so much so that I have a respect for it. But there was a time where I was like, loose change, I didn't even want it. And usually, you know, still to this day, if I get change, if I'm paying cash or something, I'll usually like leave that change in the tip, because I don't want to carry around change. But at the same time, I do have that respect for that change today, because I've got an immense respect for money and what it can do. Not just what you can do with it, but what it can do to you if you disrespect the money. And so I didn't want change at that point in my life, because I was like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna make so much money, I don't need to ever have change again. But what I was able to do, the number one thing that I was able to do to take me from being in a situation where I'd have to count change or anything to where, you know, we call this from counting quarters to counting checks. And maybe you're not getting checks, maybe it's direct deposit. The point being is that you're counting larger sums of money. So get in the right position. And I don't mean position in your company, although that could be. You know, if there's easy opportunities for advancement in your company, if that aligns with what it is that your goals are for your future, get yourself in the right position. But that right position might also involve you leaving that organization it is that you work with. That's what it was for me. Because I was not positioned for the future that I want to be able to create for myself. For myself, for my family, for everyone close around me. I wasn't even thinking as big today of helping others beyond my immediately family, but that's essentially what drives us this day now, is how do we help people change their lives in the way it is that we've been able to. And you've got to get yourself in the right position. Me working in that sales job, that wasn't the right position for a lot of different reasons, but number one, because the advancement possibilities weren't there. The DJing business, I wasn't in the right position because I didn't have the contacts that I needed. I didn't have the knowledge that I needed, and there wasn't enough of a cooperative environment for me to really kind of figure this out. So I wasn't positioned well there. Even in the example of jobs, you know, why didn't I want to be like that janitor at McDonald's who probably owns his own McDonald's today? Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe he's still the janitor. Maybe he does own his own McDonald's. I don't know. But Why didn't that? Because there's tons of people that have gone down that path. And it's so cliche that I say that because there's so many stories of people that have started at the bottom in companies like McDonald's and now they own their own today. And maybe they own this massive amount of franchises and they're a millionaire. You know, a lot of people have became millionaires through franchise restaurants. So everybody's journey, everybody's path is different. If that is around real estate, you're in the right place to get the right information to help put you in that position. Number 2 thing that I think is pretty universally applicable, and this would even apply if you're already in real estate. You know, if you've got your real estate license, how do you position yourself with the right brokerage, with the right clients, with the right state of mind, with the right tools, with the right everything to make it right? Because when you make it right, you make it happen. Number 1, you got to get in the right position. Number 2 is don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. That was part of what I was doing when I was envisioning my climb through the corporate ladder, was I was selling myself short in what it is that I could actually do. I didn't know that going into it. You know, going into it, and it's funny because when I actually took this job, I took it as something that I was like, I'll probably do this for like 6 months. And that 6 months turned into 5 years. Because I got into it, I started drinking the Kool-Aid, and what I did is I very subtly started selling myself short of what my true potential was. I've done so many greater things than I've ever done in terms of selling something for that company, or maybe helping somebody. I'm sure maybe some of the people that I've interacted with, I did some training and development for others while I was with that company, and who knows where those people are today. But there's so much of it that when I look back on it and I realize how it was like almost a completely different trajectory for my future. And the crazy part was that this is what was instilled in me all the way from like kindergarten through high school, through whatever classes I was taking, through whatever talks that I had for the people that came in there, with the propaganda machine for higher education. And look, if you're going to be a doctor, an attorney, or whatever, you know the argument. Sure, you need higher education. Did I learn some things? Absolutely. But did I pay a pretty steep price for that information? Yes. But the problem and the thing that irks not just me, but most people about higher education is it violates my 3rd tip for you here of get the right information. Get the right information, because if you're operating on bad information, if you're operating on poor information, if you're operating on the wrong information, you'll end up with bad results. What happens if you're going to bake a cake and you forget to put the flour in there? The recipe calls for 2 cups of flour and you put in no flour. Are you going to have a delicious cake? What if you forget to put in the sugar? What if you forgot to put in the flour, so you put in extra sugar for that flour? Does that give you a tasty cake? No, it gives you a pile of sugar. But what if the recipe said that's how you make it? It's an ugly world we live in out there. There's literally people that outright lie. I used to be a lot more naive, a lot more good-hearted in terms of just, believing people. But I've found so much misinformation, so much wrong information, and so many people that, that's the problem we have in today. It's funny, I like to see like the reels on Instagram and whatnot, and I get a lot of like different health ones, and it's funny because you'll have one video that contradicts the other, and they both can't be true. Somebody has the right info, somebody maybe has some wrong info, or something, because they both can't be right. And so that's why you've got to be really careful with the information it is that you're taking in. Because just because you got information does not mean you're going to be successful with that information, especially if you got the wrong information. And my number 4 tip for you is to be known. I was counting quarters, nobody knew who I was. I was just some kid. And there's a lot of other things I did growing up, from counting those quarters to go to the movies. But, you know, what if anything else it is I wanted to buy, to have, to be able to go do, from mowing every lawn on the block in the neighborhood to going door to door selling candy and selling popcorn, and at one point doing lemonade stands. At one point we had a little playhouse thing that it was a little tiny little wooden shed basically. But I went and took, you know, my money that I'd saved up and bought a bunch of little snacks because I wanted to sell these snacks to my friends in the neighborhood. And so why do I share all these little things well, throughout life I've had some sort of respect for money, but nowhere near the level of respect that I have for it today. Because I've realized if you're able to get yourself in the right position, if you're able to realize your true potential so you don't sell yourself short, because that is required to be able to put yourself in the right position. Because if you're selling yourself short, if you don't believe in yourself, you're not going to be able to put yourself in the right mindset that's going to get you in position to be able to win like you want to be able to win. And if you're not able to get in that mindset and you are selling yourself short, it's probably because you've gotten the wrong information. You've gotten the wrong information, or you didn't get the right information. Now you might say, well, I was able to get a real estate license. Doesn't that mean I have the right information? Absolutely not. Yes, you have the right information to get a real estate license, but getting a real estate license is different information than succeeding with your real estate license. Getting the license is a focus on laws and rules, so that's why you don't want to be discouraged about that exam. Making money with your real estate license is, yes, you got to follow the laws and rules, of course, but it's more about being known. Being known by those people you used to work with, so that way you could do business with them. That was a hard lesson I learned, because I had met a lot of people in my life up to that point, but I wasn't good at maintaining relationships. I wasn't good at following up. I wasn't good at reaching out to people. So there were so many opportunities that I could have had to do even more business if I was more known. And maybe that's through advertising. But that shouldn't be the first thing you're doing as a brand new real estate agent. Too many real estate agents today, everybody today, they want to take their phone out and send a text message instead of pick up the phone and call somebody. You know, if you're texting your friends about what you're doing this weekend, sure, that's a text message. But if you're communicating with somebody about the biggest purchase of their lifetime, how much is left for misinterpretation through a text message, through an email? And if you're trying to win that relationship in the first place, are people even reading your text messages? Are you really that convincing in your text messages, in your emails? And I'll answer that one for you. No, you're not. You could be much more persuasive. You could be much more interactive. You could be much more engaging when you're able to connect all of your mental power to that person in that moment. And you can't do that through a text message, through an email. Don't focus on going viral with some social media nonsense. Focus on using social media to build your relationship so you're known by the people that you'll do business with. And if you do these things, you get yourself in the right position, you make sure you're not selling yourself short, you've got the right info so you have the confidence to not sell yourself short, and you get yourself known, that's what's going to take you from counting whatever you're counting to counting huge sums of money. Are there going to be things that try to beat you down through that process? Yes. Are there going to be things that you don't expect that pop up that throw you off guard? Yes. That is life. No matter how much time you spend getting the info you spend getting in the classroom, you're not going to learn everything. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to be able to predict every possible scenario. So there's a lot of this that you have to take it as it comes. And so you get enough of the information you can to have that confidence so you don't sell yourself short, to be able to put yourself in the right position yourself with, maybe some sort of specialty. That's another example of how you could interpret this here. Instead of just trying to be a jack of all trades, like, oh yeah, I could do commercial, I could do residential, I could do this, I could do that. You know how difficult it is to do all those things? I'm a real estate broker for many years with multiple licenses, and it's still difficult for a commercial transaction. Because commercial transactions are just difficult. So maybe part of positioning yourself is the focus, the pinpointing. You know, a lot of people look at me today, especially people that are close to me, and they look at all the ventures that I've had, the companies that I've started, the different businesses it is that I'm involved in. And if you're starting out, that is not what you want to do. You need to focus, you need to zero in, you need to go all in on something, make that into something, and then you could start to diversify yourself out a little bit. If you try to do that too early in the game, you're going to take your focus off of this. So when people come to me and say, hey, we actually just had this on our Ask the Instructor coaching call. Every Wednesday we do a coaching call. You could sign up for it on our website, tampaschoolrealestate.com. And the question that came in this week, there's a few of them that were really good. But it was asking, you know, as a new agent, should I go into residential or should I go into commercial? And 100% residential, because it's easier to get the right info. Because especially if you already own a home, you already have a lot of that info. You know, maybe you've done commercial leases and you've worked in that type of corporate world. And so, yes, maybe you do have that step ahead in terms of the commercial space as well. But it's about focusing and zeroing in on something it is that you could get good at, and then you could expand from there. Another really great question that came in this week on that Ask the Instructor coaching call was, well, what if I want to get a mortgage loan originator license? I heard something about that I could get some sort of referral fee, or I could also do the loan, or what? And I was like, yes, that's absolutely true. So true that it's something that I want to do. And you might say, well, John, you've had your license for all ththese years. You're telling me you haven't gotten your mortgage license yet? No, I haven't. It took me long enough just to muster up the courage to want to go get my broker license. Why? Because yes, that's another opportunity. Yes, I can maybe make a little bit of money extra. But also, how much is that going to cost me in terms of being a distraction from what I'm primarily doing in my businesses? And so will that be something I do someday? Probably. Very likely so. Is that day here yet? No. Because I'm still focused on what I'm focused on. And maybe there's a point of expansion in the future where that gets roped in there. But until that point, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm going to stay in my position that I'm in. Because in this position that I'm in, I'm confident. I don't sell myself short. And when you get yourself in the right position where you're not selling yourself short because you have the right info and you're making yourself known, that could be really fun. That could be really powerful. Because that is going to actually get you somewhere. You keep doing more and more of this, and your whole life will go up. Because you'll find better ways to serve people. You'll become a better professional. You'll become more knowledgeable. You'll become more experienced. You'll become the expert that you desire to be. But in order to do what I do, you've got to do what I did. And hopefully with our coaching, with our State of Real Estates we provide every single Friday, you could use my advice, you could use my experiences to help bypass some of the things I shouldn't have did. That's all part of our mission here at the Tampa School of Real Estate, is to help people advance their real estate careers, whether you're just getting started or you're trying to get to that next level. And we try to do it to help you take time out of the equation, help you build more success. But in order to do that, you've got to avoid common mistakes. One example of that, taking your post-licensing as soon as you get your real estate license. Why? Because that's now going to shift the information towards what you need to know to build a foundation of what a real estate career is, how to make money with it, instead of the law and rule focus that's in your pre-licensing course. So look, any way it is we can help you out with this here, 813-333-2676. That's 813-333-2676. You can also find us online if you want to get signed up for the courses to get your real estate license. tsre.us. That'll take you right to the homepage. We've got our upcoming classes right there on that homepage. So all the classes we've got coming up, you can click onto that, view the full schedule. If you need post licensing, you need to get your broker license, anything like that. We'll make it small for the people tuning in on Instagram today since they just get to see the middle of the screen. Remember, you could always tune in live with us at tsre.us/live. That will take you to the official live page on our website where you can watch this full screen instead of the tall version that Instagram wants to give you there. But again, that phone number, 813-333-2676. We're on a mission to help people build successful real estate careers. The obvious reason? Well, when you're successful, that helps us. So we become more successful when you're successful. Pretty good business model. Something you could probably get behind. But beyond that, that's why I'm here. Why I'm here is because what real estate has been able to do for me, the position it's been able to put me in, from just getting my real estate license and starting off as a sales associate with no money, running out of money, racking up all my credit cards, cashing out my 401k, doing everything I can to be able to make this work because I knew it was going to be the best position. And that's what I was able to reinforce. I knew that real estate was the position. I just wasn't with the best brokerage, with the right training, and there are a few other things that I had to align my position a little bit better with. But once I was able to get the information I need to be confident, to not sell myself short, and to be able to go out there and effectively get myself known, that was when I was able to really start seeing some massive success with my real estate license. So whatever stage you're at, wherever you are, wherever it is that you want to go, reach out to us, 813-333-2676. You can call or text us 24/7. Call or text us at that number right there. Our advisors are not necessarily 24/7, but we do have somebody available 24/7 who will get you connected with an advisor during the normal advising hours. But if you call in right now, we have advisors in the office. If you're tuning in with us live, you want to find out more about getting the real estate license, more out of breaking out of the rut you feel like you're in, more about getting into a new career that could be rewarding, more about understanding everything that's going on and how we can help you develop the best future. If that future involves real estate, tsre.us online, 813-333-2676. It's about all the time we've got for today, so I want to thank you again for joining us for this week's episode of State of Real Estate. I hope this information that I've provided with you today here, it will help inspire you, to help you understand that no matter what you feel like is going to stop you from being able to be successful in this industry, that it can be overcame. You just got to have the right information, the right processes, the right steps, a lot of things it is that you got to get right. But the secret is we can help you get a lot of those things right. So reach out to us, get started on the right track, 813-333-2676. That's all the time we've got for today. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday for next week's State of Real Estate. Until then, have a fantastic weekend. Have a great week ahead, and I'll see you next Friday.